Director of Interdisciplinary Arts Programs at Stanford, and host of Art And, where we explore how artists and scientists are shaping new ways of seeing the world. Today we're joined by Manu Prakash, a Stanford bioengineer whose lab invents frugal open source science tools, and Jiabao Li, an artist and designer working at the intersection of technology, biology, and planetary health. Together, they created The Long Fall, a performance and installation that turns microscopic plankton into a planetary story about climate change and connection. Their collaboration asks how art and science can help us understand the gravity of climate change and how tiny organisms play an outsized role. Here's our conversation with Manu and Jiabao. I would love to just kind of back up and start from, how this collaboration came to be. How did the two of you meet and start working together? Because, you don't often hear art and plankton in the same sentence. So how did it all begin?
Yeah, so I've been admiring Manu's work for a long time. Watched his TED Talk. I used his work, the paper Fuge and the foldscope in a lot of my teaching material. I teach a class called Ecocentric Future Design, and one of the class is talking about affordable tools that designers and engineers have made so that to help people exploring various nature and animals and microscopic creatures. And the foldscope, of course, is in there. And actually, my husband, Cooper Galvin, he did his PhD rotation in Manu's lab. And that's where he introduced a lot of more Manu's work that beyond foldscope to me. And I was thinking about where do I do my sabbatical? I would like to collaborate with a scientist. And I found it would be great to work with Manu. I think there is a very inspiring place.
Jiabao had reached out on thinking about spending some time in my lab, and I've had the habit of, I think to do unusual things, you need unusual people, and that's just the reality of our world. And so for me, it's valuable to kind of create a culture where people are able to come together, share, and talk about their lived experiences. I think initially I was trying to figure out the logistics of making that work, and because Jiabao could actually be on a sabbatical, we could make that happen. These collision courses are not that unusual because many of us are trying to express and share sets of ideas or thinking about new ways of sharing ideas. It's just much more about being open to the unknown. I think when we talked, I had a very simple kind of a constraint around that. Let's work together on threads that are urgent and are focused on climate. Because, creative people can do infinite number of things together, but that infinite doesn't equate to urgent and important at that moment.
Manu's lab focuses on the planetary health and human health, and it's exactly the same for my lab. And so when I come in, I was like, I'm interested in everything. I'm interested in both the sea, the ocean, the climate, and also the global health part of the lab.
So you got into the lab and started exploring what was it about plankton and the research around the planktoscope project that Manu was doing. Like, how did that capture your interest and make you want to go deeper in that sense?
I mean, plankton themselves, they are so pretty, and we don't see them. And there's some way that we need to appreciate them more. And they have been, even though they're tiny, but they contribute like half of the oxygen we have and sequester so much carbon we have in the atmosphere. So there need to be some story to be told about their significance.
We spent a lot of time on expeditions, both trying to understand the biology. And lots of people have actually communicated the beauty of plankton in the past. I mean, all the way it goes back to the history of Haeckel. It's plankton have inspired artists in many different directions. But one of the anchor points of this particular work, and was the starting point was the fact that last year we have actually discovered a major biological process that acts as an error in how we are measuring the current amount of carbon that's sequestered in the ocean. And we have shown that there is possibly a 80 gigaton error in the carbon capture budgets. Everybody is talking about carbon and climate, but the fact very few people know that the carbon budget is not balanced. And it is all because of these planktonic processes that occur in the vertical context of the ocean. Although we could have done many different things, I think to me the urgency and the importance of this work relies on the fact that when we have uncovered an onion and peeled through, being able to communicate that complexity at play. So, there's an aesthetics to this system. It's very valuable to be enamored by it, but it's also important to understand that underlying these microbial principles lies literally life and death decisions for our planet as a whole.
Yeah, I think that is really one of the most important things that art can do, is really connect with people emotionally and communicate through different senses. But it's a big challenge. Jiabao, thinking about telling this story, going from microscopic plankton to global planetary health. How do you go about approaching that and knowing kind of which technologies to employ?
So we in the performance the long fall, we specifically have a storyline that goes across scale. So we started from the Dover White Cliff, where it's a lot of the cockleafer, the plankton died and then emerged as the mountain. And we dive down to the ocean. And on the side, we have a scale, say what's the depth, and then what's the scale of the thing you're looking at. And we dive down to marine snow, down to the different plankton, and then have the plankton instrument playing along. And then we raise up, see the ocean, the mammal, the in the ocean, the pollution in the ocean, and then back to the Dover mountain, and then to the earth. So it's across the scale to kind of give that linkage of how tiny they are, but how big of an impact they have. Because planktons are so beautiful, of course, it needs to be a big visual. So the deep space of Ars Electronica Center is the perfect place for it. And then there's the audio aspect where we see the plankton. They don't come with a sound, but actually how they look when you see it, you can feel there's a sense of sound. And I was talking to Manu about how do you design the sound part, and he gave a lot of inspiration about how the sound could be, the sound design. And yeah, so there's the audio part of that, and kind of give us another layer that we don't usually see planktons.
Yeah, I mean, you're showing audiences something that they really wouldn't be able to see otherwise.
Over the last 15 years, what we have done is tried to make the invisible visible to common people. So that starts with this baseline that at the end of the day, I mean, on expeditions that we started traveling, we have been taking microscopes and very specialized instruments. And so one of the instruments that led to the kind of data we were able to use in this piece is called the gravity machine, which we invented a couple years ago, which allows you to finally, for the first time, visualize these microorganisms as you are in their frame of reference. These plankton are traveling a kilometer in the ocean, which is kind of the depth. A single cell traveling a kilometer. So it starts to bridge the scales that Jiabao talked about, where we are demonstrating for the first time that single cells are capable of making journeys that are some of the longest journeys on our planet.
I know that fieldwork is a big part of your research, and who is capturing the images? Or Jiabao, did you do did you go on one of these expeditions with Manu to capture?
Yeah, so that part I would really love to. I was telling Manu, please bring me to fieldwork. He was very nice, bring me to the Bermuda cruise, the ocean expedition there. But I was at 27-week pregnancy, and then the captain said I couldn't go. It's past the 24-week threshold. Yeah, but I'm going for the next one.
We spend a lot of time at sea, so I spend 100 plus days at sea nowadays and then the entire lab goes, we bring students, artists, anybody who we can find a berth for. It's quite expensive and complex and complicated in terms of working at sea. But, I think it's a transformative experience, and we collect a massive amount of repository and we're building a completely new data repository now to be able to share these types of data sets more broadly. So they will be openly accessible at some point of time. It really is an emotional experience. You realize how small you are when you are out at sea, because there is no lights out in the dark. When you go out, it's a tiny little dot. And although the ships that we go are fairly big, I mean, it's 25 to 30 people cruise, but at that same time, you realize your smallness. And that's important. I think many people need to understand that this is not planet Earth, it's planet Ocean. Mm-hmm. We just misnamed our planet. And it's important. I think this work does justice to that. The ocean is the largest biosphere on our planet, because our atmosphere is quite thin, but the ocean is on average 4 kilometers deep. So it's the largest habitable place on our planet, which sort of is why the particular piece that Jiabao and I worked on is really focused on depth. Like most often, the visual that I often think about and kind of what I had shared, which is an art piece that Rebecca and I had built some time ago, is around, imagine you see Grand Canyon, but except it's not Grand Canyon, it's the ocean. And like Moses, you have split the ocean and you can see the surfaces and the chasm and the valleys in the ocean. So the piece is trying to evoke that emotion that you can see the vertical axis of the ocean, not the horizontal. Most people on a boat see the horizontal axis.
Yeah, that really shifts your perspective.
Exactly. And what I loved about the piece, which really credit to Jiabao, is there is a kind of a musical annotation to it, and it's sort of it sets, the piece gets darker and darker as you go deeper. Like, so there is a rhythm. It's playful early on and a little bit dark in the end.
I felt that when I was on the Arctic Circle artisan residency trip, where you wake up in the morning, it's a typical morning. You have glacier calving, and then a polar bear eating a seal, and then some walrus just hanging out, bathing the sun. And then I had a work where I submerged myself in the cold water. I was trying to return a frozen, melted glacier ice, give it back to the glacier. And that's where I was in a wetsuit and I was totally submerged. And I can hear each of the chirping sound of the ice falling through. They're breaking up, the bubbles going. They're just all around you. It's like the most immersive sound that you could hear. And each of the tiny melting of the glacier that create a little wave, they just keep changing my body so much, bring me up and down. At that moment, I feel like a hydrophone. I think the feeling of being on a boat is like you are a hydrophone thrown into the water, submerged underneath, and you can feel every little moment, every little sound around it.
This makes me think about accessibility. How do you bring audience members into this feeling? Nobody gets to go to the Arctic Circle, and Manu, your lab is really focused on the concept of frugal science and making science accessible to the general public. So in this piece, how did that concept carry through? And Jiabao, how with technology did you create access to that feeling?
The tools that we built are very broadly accessible to a point that for a price point of less than a cup of coffee, any human being on this planet right now can see plankton. So foldscope makes that feasible and possible. And one of the threads around this is making sure that that gets communicated across. It's one thing to experience a piece, but still it's somebody else's piece. There is a step two to it, which is then you say, now I'm so intrigued. I'm going to find my own plankton. I'm going to find my own little creatures down. And that's been the primary story of foldscope. And simultaneously, we've been deploying now planktoscopes, which is also kind of incorporated in terms of data sets. And we are starting to give planktoscopes to sailors. And sailors are a really intriguing bunch because they spend half their life in the ocean, but they have never seen plankton. Like, how ironic is that? And that's also why aesthetically, planktoscopes are actually made out of wood and bamboo. And one of the key things that we've been thinking quite a lot about by releasing a large number of artistic pieces like that, these are the first entry points. They introduce an idea to people, but there is a lot more here that people will not grasp in the 5-10 minutes of their experience. The next step is for them to take on and put on that hat. And I think they don't have to be a professional scientist to truly experience and, in fact, contribute. Currently, the planktoscope data sets, millions of data sets have come about from the community, and majority of them are actually coming from the community.
How can people get a foldscope or planktoscope?
Planktoscope is totally open source. You go to planktoscope.org. If you have a laser cutter, you can build the whole thing yourself. It takes a weekend. Lots of people have been doing that and building. Foldscope is trivial. There are 60 distributors around the world. $1.75 is the exact price, and anybody can have it. And I think there are instruction sets on the community website of how to make plankton nets. We've been running workshops for microplastics, teaching a lot of people about how to sample. If you live in a coastal environment, often enough people think about the only way to engage in the ocean is if you live next to the ocean. But in fact, these processes that we talk about in this piece, and both the carbon capture and oxygen production, all happen in every aquatic environment. So as long as you can find any body of water, you will have the freshwater analogs to most of the species as well. So literally, it's super simple. You go to foldscope.com, shell out $2, and you can have this experience.
Amazing.
It's very fulfilling to see the hunger for science on this planet is very deep. But when you share it in a visual form, it's transformative. I mean, I think we have been sharing science in words and interpretations, but emotional experience for science happens visually. And in fact, it is one of the best mediums in which you can allow people to interpret the meaning. And this is also why the visual context is so important. And to a certain extent, I would say, much of the work that is happening all across campus, we can all ask ourselves a question: are we really sharing science in the right media that will transform people emotionally? Every individual that's pursuing a goal has an opportunity to be able to create new forms of representing what they have discovered.
And Jiabao, how do you go about approaching data and translating it to visual, audio, musical formats?
Yeah, so for this one, because the gravity machine creates all the visual that are the falling of the planktons. And so I'm thinking, okay, then putting on the giant screen, you also need to create those almost like a free fall. So the whole journey comes with the fall, both on the bigger scale from the Dover Mountain to the bottom of the ocean, but also on the plankton scale. So there was a session where we created a plankton instrument where you can touch these buttons to trigger the fall of different plankton. We also color coded them so we know like these are the zooplanktons, these are the phytoplanktons, and
so it was gamifying it.
Yeah, just like playing any instrument or any game buttons. You play it and then you see all this falling. There's also an interactive part where we invite the audience to come up and then they play. And they're like, oh, the larvae of the starfish look like this. I never thought about it before. This is so such a surprise. And we also fine tune each of the sound of each button or each of the plankton to there's a paper that Manu published about the fluctuating frequency they have. So it's also related to that. So it's through this interaction and also through the storytelling, we turn this scientific data into a story that's touching. And
what I like about it is every piece is unique in that way. Then it depends on how you're feeling that day. And in fact, one of the things that we've discovered when we go out to sea is that the ocean is different every day. It is so dynamic that what we capture in our data that day might never be captured ever again because the ocean is not going to be the same ever again. That's the degree of complexity. And so this generative nature of the piece was important primarily because every performance should be a little bit different. And if you're performing it in the California context, we should be thinking about very high abundance of phytoplankton. But if we're doing this in the Dover Mountains themselves, somewhere in the UK, it's very, very cold water. You completely change the species composition. And so the piece should change. Mm-hmm. And I think, if you're in Hawaii, then it's very oligotrophic, very little things grow, and then you would just primarily be dealing with a very low abundance in the ocean. So it really is something that changes dramatically, not just in space, but also in time.
Especially, I think, in this moment, it's especially important as there's, divisive information out there. I think
it's worse than divisive, but I would have chosen a different
open conversation and true information is really important in this moment.
Yeah. I mean, I think I would say it's a matter of shame. As scientists, when I see this and the fact that we are rewriting literally climate reality, I think this is an urgent moment. It's not a surprise that we chose this particular narrative, but at that same time, what is unfolding currently makes these approaches, because art is a very powerful way to resist. And frankly, I know no better way than art to really actually express much of what's unfolding. There is no better way to connect and communicate with people. The depth, the complexity, the humanness of science, and the process of science. And I think this is why it's important for people to experience science rather than just read about science.
And I think art here, with some humor and some beauty and some interaction, could bring us out of the panic and build curiosity and try to do something and actually take action.
Inspire some hope. Yeah. I sometimes think about artists and scientists getting along really well because they both ask questions. But in my mind, an artist approaches a problem without an answer, just with a question. And scientists, the scientific method has a hypothesis. So there's an expectation of something in the end. And I don't know if that
Most
causes
of the time,
friction.
What I do, Ellen, has no hypothesis, and people,
That's
scientists.
Why you work with artists.
Scientists tell this story that they have a hypothesis, but frankly, we just go and look.
They say
That's the reality.
They say going out with Manu to the ocean is like go fishing. You never know what you'll catch.
That's it. Yeah. I don't think there is any difference between an artist and a scientist. Like, our processes are very similar. So these are just labels. I pursue my work trying to sometimes understand beautiful things. The reason I work in the ocean is because it is really beautiful. And then the approach that I can take allows me to ask certain class of questions, then suddenly they transition into what other people might call science and go back and forth. And, history of science and art has shown that individuals that think creatively really need both of these approaches, even if I don't believe they're different at all.
What advice would you give to other artists and scientists who want to engage in this kind of cross-disciplinary co-creation, collaboration, and interdisciplinary research? It seems like it's hard sometimes to translate between those worlds.
I kind of summarized a theory. I try to remember it as OTPCC, one-time password credit card. The O is open. Both parties very open to each other's world. Like art is not only about science communication, but also asking questions. It's a form kind of inquiry. And then T is time. It's very it costs a lot of time. Costs time for the artist to learn the science world. Sometimes you need to completely relearn a field that you have touched before. And then process is very process driven. The road to the collaboration, that whole process, it matters as much as the end product. And then C is curiosity. Both artists and scientists very curious to each other's world. And then share the credit, even though the science part, like writing paper, is very different than the art kind of sharing the credit. Yeah.
My personal rule when I work with people is I don't want, and this is a rule that I have with just students, anybody, I don't want it to feel like a transaction. Nothing that you create that's totally new in this world is like, I give you this and you give me back. If I didn't learn anything, then it was not worth it. And if the other person didn't learn anything that's completely new, is it worth it? Because we did not shift each other's frameworks. You find your own tribe of people to work with. Not everybody can work with everybody, and it's fine. I can live with that. It's just finding ways where it should not feel like transactions.
Yeah, I totally agree. And that's the type of work that I really want to encourage more of at Stanford and beyond. Just the understanding of, what art can bring to different disciplines, how they work together on equal footing, not one for the other or vice versa.
Absolutely.
It's really about a partnership. So thank you so much for the conversation and all of this information and perspective that you shared today.